What's good? What's good, everybody? It's time for Elevated Vibes right here on IntellectualRadio.com, iHeart radio station. Now, to get up in this conversation, y'all know the deal. Hit the number up 708-223-8953. Once again, that is 708-223-8953, or you can hit us on Facebook Live. Now, everybody, it's one of those type of shows I got to do this.
Be cool, brother.
Oh, okay. What is about to be said here is not to attack, it's not to put down any certain group or culture, ethnic, whatever. It's not to put you down. Right. It is not to put you down. It is not to attack you. You know, one of our goals here at Elevated Vibes is to push for unity, push for respect, push for love. And through that, we have to have conversation, all right, to see what's wrong and start working on what's right. All right, everybody, y'all know the deal. I'm your boy Abdul Rashid, along with
the boss man back here in the studio.
And we are blessed once again to have the great Dr. Vincent Gaddis, everybody.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Thank you for coming back. You definitely got a lot of feedback on the last show. You know, one of our most watched shows. So thank you for coming back.
Well, it's an honor to once again be with two brilliant black men.
Well,
thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
All the credit goes to Rich. He takes up for both of us as that Gemini.
You got to go to the last show.
Hey, you know, the Gemini's got both of them. They real smart, you know.
No doubt. And for everybody who does not know, this is about to be a talk about Israel and the Middle East. Okay,
and politics going on. Yeah, I mean, we're going to incorporate the politics
we
of the day.
Twist and tie with that, you know, and that's why we got the great doctor here, so we can have understanding and we can build. All right. Okay. I already want to bring this at you, Doc. What's his name? Yahya Sinwar was taken out.
Mm-hmm.
We as America, we have the ability to maybe now go into this road to go towards peace. All right. We got a hand in this, even though the government of Israel wants to act like we don't. We got a hand in this. All right. So I really want to know, what do you believe that we need to do to start pushing further towards peace and these peace talks? I mean, there are some out there, and I do know it, and there's been some issues, but what's your thought on it?
Yeah, that's a great place to start, and a complicated place to start, because the barrier, and I think Council on Foreign Relations, United Nations, several other scholars, and Applebaum have all written and talked about this, and it's true. The obstacle to peace is Netanyahu. He is the obstacle. Prior to this attack on last October, it's been at this for over a year now.
Yes, sir.
Netanyahu was on the verge of losing power, right? And now the war is his way of staying in power. So any peace deal has to have the sign off of Israel, and the leader of Israel is not interested in peace. And he pretty much said so at the United Nations September, when he came to the United Nations, and he said that because Netanyahu faces a lot of issues. There's a lot of blowback because the hostages have not been released. Now Israel has had their reprise attack on Iran. They've assassinated leaders of Hezbollah.
And Hamas, correct?
And Hamas, of course. And so everyone meaning the United States, NATO, our European partners, even the Saudis and the Egyptians are like, okay, this is a window for discussion. but the obstacle is Netanyahu, and he faces another problem. The deeper Israel gets into this whole fighting against Hamas and Hezbollah, something that was never clarified in the beginning, remains a problem today, and will continue to be a problem in this conflict. What are the victory conditions? When do we know? When do the Israelis know they've achieved whatever it is they think they're trying to achieve as a result of October 7th, right? So, because we're still fighting. So you can't say, well, if you kill the leader of Hamas, that's the victory condition, then we can talk, because they killed him and we ain't talking. Well, we got to take the leaders of Hezbollah to relieve a threat of leadership in the north, right? In southern Lebanon. Okay, they did that. Right, but we ain't talking. Well, we have to have a reprise attack on Iran because they launched ballistic missiles at us. Okay, that happened last week.
Right, but that was a result of you attacking our leaders.
Right,
and
absolutely.
And our cell phones, and we forget that a couple of months ago, Israel violated Iran's territory to assassinate another leader.
Yes,
and Iran
right.
did not respond, or they did not respond. And so I think the fundamental problem is that you have the little brother dragging the big brother to the fight. And so right now we've sent more warships to the Gulf to dissuade Iran from attacking or responding. People forget that Israel and Hezbollah almost pretty much came to a tie. And that's what caused Israel to pursue for peace
in 2006.
Yes,
yeah.
That it was. It was. Hezbollah.
I'm just throwing it in there, so
right. For the day, right?
People know that.
So, and this is why I want to tie into the national politics. Should Vice President Harris win? Will that be the opportunity? Or will she use too much political capital to disavow ourselves from our entanglement? Like, sometimes you got to let people find out from themselves. You got to ice skate uphill. And I'm wondering, without the United States support, if we start saying, because we just approved another massive bill to send to Israel.
Right.
We know what is going to happen if the nominee for the Republican Party wins, and what's blowing my mind is he's had talks with Netanyahu as a private citizen, not as president, but he's having private talks with the leader of another nation and pretty much saying, oh, you do whatever you got to do. It will part of that window, though, I'm wondering, Professor, is does Vice President Harris, hopefully President-elect Harris, get in and begin to talk as if to say, just like Trump was talking about Ukraine, now we need to talk about Israel. Do you see that as being an avenue towards the peace prosperity?
She's in a rock and a hard place on Israel, because unfortunately she's tied down by her own words. We're going to support Israel and Israel's right to exist, blah, 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 which means weapons, right? That's what that means. And at the same time, she's trying to say, but we have to end the carnage and so on, and the humanitarian catastrophe that's happening in Gaza. Well, the two, you can't have one without the other, right? You can't stop the humanitarian crisis until you stop bombing them. And that means cutting off military aid to Israel. And you said it quite rightly, I think it's too big I hope I'm wrong. I don't think Harris, she will work very hard to reach some kind of peace agreement. She will try and put pressure on Netanyahu to come to the table. But if it comes down to we're going to cut aid to Israel or not, she's not going to do that.
But let me also put this out here as well, that I found out that there has been an ultimatum laid to Israel for improvement on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Unfortunately, it happened until November 12th.
Mhm.
So if the other gets in there, you already know that's going
Yeah,
to be
right.
shot
That's
to
a-
nothing.
Yeah.
But hypothetically, if she gets in there, which we all hope she does, do you believe that will help?
It certainly is going to help because Netanyahu and Putin in Ukraine are both operating on a timetable of and a desire for Trump to win. And if he loses, a Harris presidency absolutely changes the calculus. But the question for her is what kind of, as a new president, she will have a certain cachet, greater cachet of political capital than normal. If you spend it on solving let me say it another way. If she does that, and I would applaud her for doing it, you can't just get a ceasefire. You have to push all the way to a two-state solution. Because anything that is just a ceasefire is just a setup for the next
Conflict.
round
Right.
of carnage against the Palestinians, right? You're going to have to do something about Israeli settlements in the West Bank. That has been a naked power grab by the Israelis to expand settlements in the you have to do something about that, right? You've got to save the buffer zone in southern Lebanon along the UN created boundary from 2006 and stop. All of that has to happen. You can't, if she wastes spends all of her political capital just to get a ceasefire, that would be a travesty.
But Netanyahu has survived what, 5 presidents? Clinton, Bush.
He was around the
Bush.
time with Clinton.
Yeah, I think
so.
I think so.
I
Yeah.
thought it was
His first time, and then he was out of office. Then he
Right.
came back.
Okay.
Right.
So
and and he's hoodwinked, or I think Vice President Harris can disavow, because the problem is Joe Biden went all in.
Mhm.
He went all in. Of course, this is a response to the October 7th massacre, and things like that. And of course, the world was horrified, and it was our hope that there would be a proportional response,
Right.
Um,
Which has never happened in the case of Israel.
And so I don't think any person envisioned the carnage that would be inflicted by Israel up on its neighbors. And more so than that, the expansion, of going after Hezbollah, and things like that. And it does not seem that the powers that be in Israel are satisfied. And I don't know what's happening in Israel, like what type of support he has, or things like that. And so I think, from the very beginning of her presidency, she has to threaten. Like and what you're saying is there's always caveats, like, oh, we'll support humanitarian aid, but anything that goes boom, or radar, and of course, or we do like we did with Ukraine, we import defensive weapons. Okay, but anything that can be used to further progress the war, to expand the war, should be, no, like,
right.
And I get it too. I mean, we talk about it from an esoteric point of view, but you also got to remember, people are making money off of this.
Oh, absolutely. Israel is the 4th largest arms dealer in the world, and the United States' #1 customer, who's the largest arms dealer in the world. Right. So, absolutely, there's tons of cash being made off of the deaths of Palestinians and now Lebanese. But I just want to change gears for 1 second.
No problem.
The Netanyahu thing is important. What Israel does or doesn't do, and there's some fracturing within the Knesset, but you both know, we all saw it in 2001, right? When the nation goes to war, people put blinders on, because you're supporting the nation, right? But on the other side of this conflict is Iran. And Iran has a long-term strategic interest in continuing to fund groups like Hezbollah, groups like Hamas, continue their threat. I don't think they have the actual ground military capability to really go to war. The equipment is just too old for that. When their president died,
Yes.
he died in a makeshift used Huey helicopter
From 1960 something.
Yeah, and that's what you're flying the president of the country around on.
Right.
Okay, but the long-term goal of Iran is not so much about Israel. It's about changing the strategic power alignment of the Middle East itself, right? For years, it ran along a Sunni axis, right? From Istanbul to
the Saudis,
to for a time, the Lebanon, when it had an actual president and an actual government, right?
Yes.
Lebanon to Saudi Arabia to Egypt. And Iran's goal is to create a Shia-dominated Middle East that runs from Tehran through Iraq to Damascus to Lebanon.
And I just, for people to have a context of Islam, there are different sects within Islam.
Right.
So you have the Sunnis, the Shiites,
it is one
you
more.
got Druze.
Right. So these are different sects. Right. And traditionally these sects have interpreted the Quran in different ways.
But the two biggest ones is always the Sunni and Shia.
Yeah, they're the two largest sects in Islam. And being able to, for Iran, this is a long-term strategy that ultimately is still rooted in the 79 revolution, right? And to create a Middle East where it becomes the key decision maker, right? Because if you think about it in the post-war construction, Saudi Arabia and Turkey were the decision makers.
Okay.
Right? I'm no fan of Saddam Hussein, but Saddam Hussein's strategic importance was that he was the block of that expansion, because the Ba'athist Party was, nominally Muslim, but really more secular than anything, the Ba'ath Party in Iraq. So when we tore down Saddam and then came in and crushed the Sunni insurgency in the surge, it opened the door wide open for Iranian influence, and that has run right on through all the way to Lebanon and Hamas.
But let me throw this at you as well, just because we spoke about it a couple of times. The Saudis are starting to get into this and looking for peace talks and so forth. Do you think it's a possibility? I mean, they're kind of a little bit down the line, but then yet they're a major money player. So they're going to listen to them.
Well, what is good in this for peace, if we think about the calculus here, is that the Saudis, before October 7th, there had actually gotten to a place of a strategic agreements between Israel and the Saudis and UAE. It was revelatory. And once October 7th came, the Saudis have been, from what I can see, mostly silent. And I think that's, for them, it's a cultural issue, right? Like, okay, now that there's hot fighting between Israel and the Palestinians, can we actively take the side of Israel if we're going to negotiate for peace? And so that's a tough hoe for Saudi. They have the money, but where the interesting interlocutor here has been the United Arab Emirates.
Okay.
And that's kind of where all of the UAE has become kind of the Switzerland of the Middle East. You know what I mean? This is where the secret negotiations are coming. When we send an envoy, that's where they're going and having these discussions. Certainly, Saudi Arabia is looking for stability.
Yes.
I'm not convinced how much they're looking to put pressure on Israel if that becomes perceived in some way of supporting Israel. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's the thing Saudi Arabia's got to figure out. How do we push for peace, push for ceasefire, and do it in a way that is clearly pro-Arab, pro-Palestinian, pro-Lebanon?
Well, none of this is going to happen, though. I mean, as you said, Netanyahu is the biggest bloc.
Mm-hmm.
So all the traditional methods, soft power, hard power, that we would use to influence, if money can't influence you, if trade with the United States. I mean, the problem is that you cannot separate the calf from the mother.
Right.
You know, the calf, as long as we continue to nurse the calf, the only one who can broker any type of peace arrangement is the United States, forcing them to come to the table.
Here's my question for you on that. Do you, and I don't know the answer, well, of course you do because you're brilliant. Do you think the United States has that kind of moral diplomatic power to do what you're saying?
Now, to be honest, with that,
that's the question.
Here's the
do
question.
we really have that
yes.
power?
Do we have that power? Yes. Do we choose to exercise it? No. There's a difference. Like, do we have that power? Yes. If we did and followed the strategy of the 80s, divestment from, campaigns, the movies. I mean, America is moved through its movies. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was Cry the Beloved Country that shocked the United States into consciousness. Now, we had known because it started on the college campuses.
Right.
But we have recently, with these protests, and where I'm at listening to this podcast about the police, using the muscle of the police that we did not see in the 80s to quell this.
Yeah.
Remember when there was calls for Coca-Cola to divest from South Africa?
I was a college student myself back in those days at Rutgers University, and
did you fear the police coming on and moving?
Oh no,
right.
Jesse Jackson. I'll just say this real quick. Chicago connection. Jesse Jackson gave a speech at the campus, the main campus of Rutgers University, on divestment. And it was the first time live in person I actually understood the power of a charismatic leader. I mean, there were like about 5,000 students. I mean, he had us in the palm of his hand. I mean, it was quite amazing. And Johnson & Johnson, one of the last holdouts in the divestment thing, their world headquarters is in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And so the students were marching on J&J, boycotting J&J, college kids were working as security guards inside the facility and smuggling out papers instead of shredding them in the shredder and giving them to the student newspaper. I mean, all of those things were going on. But no one ever thought for a minute they're going to come gas us. Yeah, no one thought that for a moment.
I mean, I'm just thinking about a couple of years ago. Do y'all remember the March on Wall Street?
Mm-hmm.
Where college students sat out,
Occupy
Wall Street, and we were confronted with images of police officers recklessly just using tear gas on students, and so, you think back, we think the days of Kent State Massacre are well behind us. So to answer your question, yes, we do have the power. The problem is twofold. We are so divested of our protesting lineage. that we have forgotten. Everybody's a political armchair revolutionary. We're all keyboard warriors. But the heroes, the people who are willing to lay down their lives, part of the way the civil rights movement worked was because women were being arrested because they were killing the men. So the women had to. The women had to be first, because at that point we had some decency and said, oh, you can't do this. There was a time when Martin said, put the children out front. People don't know that when they were marching through, and you see those hounds and those dogs and Bull Connor released. Those were 13 and 14-year-olds. But that was an intentional thing to shock the conscience of the nation. But just there is a coldness, but there's a politicalness to say, I'm going to put my 13 and 14-year-olds out there, so that the nation will be shocked when this man, the German Shepherd, when they turned those hoses. That was the beginning of the end. So that's one. Two, we have quieted dissent by saying that if you are speaking in terms of the Palestinian right to exist, somehow you are anti-Semitic. And we talked about this the last time.
We did.
When you intertwine the church with the state, you can't blame me when I'm talking about the church, because you chose that. I'm talking about Israel. Israel just happens to be majority practice Judaism. But when I'm talking about Israel, I'm talking about the political and the armed force of the state committing mass genocide outside of their religion. Outside of that. I find it ironic, that they seem to be following Old Testament, and stuff like that. But, love thy neighbor as one loves thyself, but that's cool as long as you look like me. So that's two. And the third one is we quiet the dissidents. Look at Tahani Coates and what he went through on CBS. For those of you who don't know, he just wrote a new book in which he goes to 3 countries, one of which is the Palestine. And he was on CBS, and I urge people to look this interview up. And the reporter literally comes after him. And Tahani's like, hold on. There's no problem with Israel speaking up for itself. We got masses of people doing that. I'm here to try to give voice to voice. Where is that voice of the Palestinians? Because there is something to be said. Nelson Mandela was that charismatic figure for South Africa. But again, where is that story for the Palestinians? We don't have the Cry the Beloved Country. What was the other one that came out? That was
Cry Freedom.
Cry Freedom. Thank you.
Yes.
Those stories shock the conscious. When we hear about I forget the one about the Cameroon, that movie, The Killing Fields.
Cambodia.
And The Killing Fields. We haven't
had
a
great movie.
Sorry. But you belay my point. These are the movies, and we haven't had that. And until we have that, because Americans we just learn through movies.
We certainly don't read. So.
We get our knowledge in a fictionalized version that can lead one to finding out the real history.
Absolutely. Yes. So totally agree with that.
Till we have that story, until those 3 things come together, that's why you're allowed to tell the narrative. Control the narrative, you can control what happens. It was somebody who once said that when the lie becomes legend, print the legend. And that's what's been happening for so long.
Oh, absolutely.
But see, also I'm gonna give another thing to add to that, and that our government needs to see, okay? Because of course we have a hand in the Middle East, we have a hand all over the world, okay? But the thing is, because we are sitting on our hands and letting them do what they wish right now, our influence is becoming weaker and weaker and weaker. They see what Netanyahu is doing to these people on both sides, north, south, either way. And, a lot of other countries will start saying, okay, why am I going to listen to America? He's not.
It is a serious issue. And I think it's been a serious issue for several years, dating back to the election of the orange one in 2016, because he decimated international norms and rules. And it's taken all of the Biden presidency to even begin to build back even some of the carte blanche that the United States had, some of that political, moral, economic power, ability to persuade, ability to lean on people, right? When Biden got elected, we finally started funding Ukraine, but you'll remember one of the biggest sticking points when Biden got elected was there were people saying, if you're going to support Ukraine now, you just can't send them 155 howitzers. You got to send tanks. You got to send planes. You got to send more anti-aircraft weapons and more long-range artillery and rockets. And we wouldn't do it. And it took almost 2 years of the Biden administration before we finally, with NATO, started sending in tanks. And only in the last 6 or 7 months have we finished the pilot training for F-16 fighters. So we have, we're building back that ability, and a Harris presidency, I think, will move that even further if she uses it. But if she doesn't win, what the rest of the world will do is turn their backs on the United States diplomatically, culturally, I think, as well. I mean, this is not what this show is about tonight, but just the watchword. Okay, you heard it here first. If this dinglehead wins, watch the euro become the
Currency.
world reserve currency. And that would be devastating to the United States.
It's not only that, but you spoke about is our continued support of this genocide that's taking place means that we no longer hold the moral ground.
Exactly.
We can no longer
Yes.
criticize China for its treatment. You can no longer criticize Russia for its treatment. And that's the issue. And when you speak about it diplomatically, the problem is that the world got to a point where it said you can rely on United States, regardless of who's in the White House. I once heard someone say, it may have been an episode of West Wing, it's hard being an enemy of the United States. It's harder being a friend, of the United States. But when you're allowing this, where the world court has condemned Israel and used everything but the word genocide, when they have said that Netanyahu and members of his cabinet are war criminals, and we continue to support these efforts, we have lost the moral high ground. United States was the bellwether of what human rights were. The United States was, and sometimes we have lost it. Remember in Iraq, the way we treated our prisoners and things like that. But the United States has always been the country has been fundamentally committed to the principles of human rights. But now that you have this threat of fascism, the mass deportation of others, who don't look like the majority, the right to, round up people and ask for identity. I urge people to go read the first couple of chapters of the Diary of Anne Frank, or go to any social studies book and figure out what happened on the night of the breaking glass and what happened after that. I don't know if it's a collective amnesia, a lack of knowledge. And we were talking about this before, and this is my turn towards local politics, because as we know, November 6th is like hours away, hours. And we stand at the bell, we stand literally at the precipice, looking into the abyss. All right. This will go down as one of the greatest elections of history, or will not. And I know people are sick and tired of hearing like, it's this one, it's always this one. But I'm this is not people crying Chicken Little. All right. I don't know who these undecideds are. I don't understand. I don't understand how the race is 47-49 within this. And we were talking about this. I understand that there will always be a certain part of the population who has fascist imperial intent. I don't understand the willingness to give up that which your parents have fought for, that which has been the cornerstone. When we said, even as little kids, we don't say we pledge allegiance to the president. We say, I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we took the Constitution, all of us had to take the Constitution. I think they still have to take it. I'm not sure. Maybe that's the issue. But we said to defend against enemy, both foreign and domestic.
And domestic, yeah. Well, it's definitely an election that is like no other. And you're right. I mean, I hope everyone that is watching, hearing, has voted already. But if you haven't, definitely go out and vote. Regardless of all of the issues about, well, the Electoral College and, my vote doesn't get, no, vote. It is critical that we do.
Just as a side note, because they are literally talking about this coming down to like a couple of precincts in Nevada.
Yep.
Nevada people. Yep. Like, I love Vegas, but Nevada?
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's thanks to, as we were talking before, the Electoral College, which takes away really in fundamental ways the right of the will of the people, because we don't elect a president like we do everything else by popular vote. And there's some historical precedent for that rooted in slavery. But the other side of this, or not other side, but in addition to what you're saying, back to our topic, if Harris doesn't win, the genocide will spread. I guarantee you that. If Harris doesn't win, there will be a genocide in Ukraine. For those of you who haven't been keeping up with that conflict, 10,000 North Korean troops are in Russia right now on their way to Ukraine.
Yes, they are.
So if Harris doesn't win, the global consequences, China
takes Taiwan.
Is now, if we want to believe what she says on its face, 2027 is what he has outlined as a timeline for China to take back Taiwan. Okay, do you want a president in office who thinks she is and Kim Jong-un are great leaders? Or do you want someone who is going to oppose them?
Right.
Somebody who thinks Putin is a great leader, or someone who opposes him? Well, somebody who thinks Netanyahu is the greatest thing since sliced bread, or someone who at least we hope is going to work to stop the genocide, to stop the killing, to get a ceasefire. I mean, that's what it's about. I mean, hey, vote now, because you know what? He already said, look, I take these people at their word. This might be the last election if Trump wins this thing, right? And so these issues that we're talking about, foreign policy issues, will get much worse, much deeper, but because at home, things are going to get much worse and much deeper.
And I know we're talking about global politics, but imagine the internal strife. And here's the thing about a coup. All coups having success is that there was an unsuccessful coup before it. And so now that they know, and literally there are books out there where they were touring the different parts of the government, and they were asking and the Obamas had to explain, like, no, they go with us. Like, you got to have people to replace. And now that they have, 2026, the blueprint, literally you have the enemy's playbook, but there's this cognitive dissonance that seems to be taking place where it was like, everybody's like, oh, he's joking, or he wouldn't do that. And you're like, no, the man literally said he's going to be a dictator for a day. The only thing about a day is he gets to decide how long that day is. And, it is scary. I mean, it is literally scary. And, if you didn't believe January 6th was the proof.
Right.
January 6th. And here's the thing. If you claim to be a law and order abiding citizen, all right, those people wage war against their own. You know, we just had a National Guard guy from Illinois get sentenced to a year.
And several police officers. Were convicted as well.
Right. And so.
And they killed 5 cops.
Right.
You know, well, they would say they didn't. It was incidental, but you get the point. But if they're willing to wage war against people in uniform, right, what do you think they're willing to do to you? You know, we were talking about it. They came from my neighbor and I did nothing. They came, you know, from my brother and I did nothing. And then they came from my father and I did nothing. And then they came from me and there was nobody to do nothing. You know, you will be able to say to your children, your grandchildren that, you know, we're always so quick to wage war without. The harder war to fight is the war within. And you can say for this election, I took a stand against tyranny. Right. And it came from the internal threat. But yet we were able to turn the tide back, you know, and whether or not this will break the fever, I don't know. You know, there are too many things in place. The Democrats, should they win both the House and the Senate, need to be bold. You know, one of the first things they need to do is get rid of the Electoral College. There should be massive talk about expanding the Supreme Court.
Sign the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Get the Voting Rights Act so that we can go after these states that are going after, you know, rights and stuff like that. You know, you already have a selection of state senators or state legislators talking about, oh, we're going to ignore this and do that. You know, Texas shutting down all of the voting places where predominantly people of color would vote. This is a time we cannot go worry about the next election, right? This is now.
And then let me add on to that with this statement that I did find out about, and everybody please listen and understand. All right, within, if I remember right, it is Georgia, also Virginia, and maybe also North Carolina. They have Wisconsin. They have these people that are contesting your voter records.
But that was the states we know about.
Right. But what I'm saying is, it is out there, and they are trying to do it. So we need to be on that as well. You know, you go to vote, make sure your I can't even get it out right. It's going good, and you know it gets out there, and to make sure, because they're doing whatever they can, to make your vote.
Well, they already attacked the ballot box.
Voter intimidation is a crime.
Yes.
So film it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And they burned up the ballot boxes in Washington State.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no end to what the MAGA people will do to win this election. And if they don't win, I fear that there will be violence.
Right.
I fear that either way, I think the torch has been lit.
Yeah.
Right.
I think should he win, there will be violence.
Yeah, it'll be a different kind of violence, but nonetheless.
He has already sown the seeds of distrust, you know, by saying, you know, if it's a free and fair election. So, of course, and you got to remember, it was Fox News who called it first last time.
Right.
You know, and if you're willing to disavow Fox News, you know, what hope is there? You know, there's Les Brown says there's this thing, and the Republicans have taken it and warped it. But there's this thing he says, it's not over till I win. You know, and he was talking about in the context of his son kept wanting to play tic-tac-toe and he kept losing, and the son was like, no, Dad, we got to keep going till I win. You know, but they've taken that and twisted it on his head. And I think, you know, for the people here, I mean, I know we're on YouTube and things like that. I think in Illinois, we kind of get a false sense of how bad it can be. You know, like when you look at those lines in Georgia and people are standing in lines for 9 hours, you know, standing in the same line that our forefathers stood in line for to vote. When you're hearing about places in Texas being disenfranchised, when, I have worked the polls, in a previous life, and, most of the time the disruptions are, this is not your voting place or something like that. But imagine, just go back to, right after the Civil War, when people were coming, people of color for the first time are allowed to vote. And there are people outside with guns ready to lynch you. If our forefathers and foremothers can stand and do what they needed to do, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing what you're doing in spite of the fear. It is now time for us to take our place in history, to demark our line in history. Will we be filmed doing it? Will there be an Eyes on the Prize doing that? Will there be a Frontline special? No. But let the history books, because the victors write the history books. And if we lose this one, it won't say that this is the place where democracy faded out. It will say this is where America came to grips and realized it needed to change its ways, right? But this history, what is happening right here, right now, needs to be told to our grandchildren. When we were told that democracy is neither free or willingly given, this is about power, people. And now it's the ballot or the bullet. And I can only say that, and I know I'm preaching, and I know we're tired of hearing people preaching, but this is up for all the marbles, and we cannot afford to take our foot off the gas. We have to go. This is Chicago, so vote early, vote often. Like just vote.
Well, we got to get out there and
vote.
And we have to, and and we also have to not we have to also not pull off the gas of speaking and confronting those who you're not going to change a Trumper's mind, but darn it, don't back off either. And this has gotten to separating families and separating parents from children and separating neighbors and which I cry for that. I weep for that. But the truth is the truth. And if you don't stand for the truth, then what principles do you have left? Right? I mean, there is no you cannot. Being silent is siding with the oppressor. You can't be silent. And in this case, that means you can't be silent when people say, we need to, XYZ Project 25. That's what we need to do. What? Oh, whoa, wait a minute. I don't care if it's tariffs. I don't care if it's the abortion issue, whether it's deportation. All of these are moral issues and must be confronted. And where the moral ground is the moral ground that opposes these kinds of policies, right? And so that's where we have to say, and hopefully with a Harris victory, that moral power swells up to her to be able to move on the international stage in a way we're talking about to create peace, in various areas of the world.
Okay, with her victory, in which we all do hope, all right, do you feel that we can get to that two-state solution and at least come to where it is back to the 1967 green zone lines for Palestine and Israel?
I don't think there's any other way. I mean, when you really get down to it, there's either there's one state called Israel where Palestinians have no rights.
We won't have heard of the Palestinians after this.
Or there's a two-state solution. Because if you leave it to Netanyahu, because look, kill all the Palestinians is not a victory condition. So the answer to your question is that has to be the solution. And that is going to require Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the other Middle Eastern powers to come in agreement with the creation of a Palestinian state as well.
All right, everybody, we are up against the time, but as always, we say, any questions, any thoughts, hit us up on the live feed, and also you can hit us up through email at the triplethreatofradio@gmail.com. Once again, that is the triplethreatofradio@gmail.com. We are blessed once again to have the professor with us, and hey, my guy.
Vote.
Right.
Vote.
Right. And I'm your boy Abdul Rashid. This is Elevated Vibes. Stay tuned for the Danasha Harrison Show. Much
Vote.
love. Peace.
Vote.